Ken Lewis, CEO of Bank of America, in the hot seat today on the Hill, getting quizzed by Congress. Best way to tell you what happened is to simply show you this.
Those operating under the color of our government's seal used any unreasonable influence or threats.
Some perceived threat or abusive action.
The Treasury and the Fed would remove the board and management of the corporation. If that isn't a threat, I don't know what is.
It just seems very difficult to accept that that would not seem threatening behavior.
Whatever threat or whatever word it is we're going to use for Mr. Bernanke and Mr. Paulson interactions.
Can it be looked at any other way other than a threat?
Good question. But I got a few of my own. Will Ben Bernanke be forced to testify on this issue? Will former Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson be called to account? And who's to blame? And will anyone be charged with perjury? I mean, that's actually possible here because of previous statements they made. Let's find out if we can get to the bottom of this. Representative Jim Jordan is a Republican from Ohio. Dennis Kucinich is a Democrat from Ohio. Both sit on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee and were in on the hearing today. Congressman Kucinich, is anyone going to launch an investigation of Bernanke and Ken Lewis to see whether they perjured themselves before Congress?
Well, today's hearing was about Bank of America and Bank of America's testimony about how it got to where it got, where it collapsed. And the fact of the matter is, well, there's a lot of talk about threats, and we must call the Fed in to testify. Today, we focused on Bank of America, and frankly, Mr. Lewis has not yet been able to explain how in the world he took his company down with the Merrill Lynch acquisition and didn't give his shareholders the information that they had a right to on December 5th. So, you know, that's one part of it. The other part is this talk about threat, but we need the Fed in to try to establish exactly what happened.
Oh, so it sounds like you are saying, Congressman, that Bernanke will be called?
Yeah, he'll be invited. You know, I mean, the chairman has to make the invitation. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee. But I think that based on the way events are going, that I think you could safely predict that the Fed will be invited to testify.
Invited but not subpoenaed.
Well,
that'd be a little rude.
When people decline an invitation, the next step is you subpoena them.
Okay, Congressman Jordan, what do you think? Do you need to hear from Benjamin Bernanke on this?
Most definitely. Ben Bernanke, Hank Paulson, and frankly Tim Geithner was involved in this too. Today on the witness stand, I asked Mr. Lewis about the initial meeting they had back in October, right after the TARP program was passed. On October 13th, the 9 CEOs of the biggest banks in this country were called to Washington, D.C. His testimony was they didn't know what the meeting was going to be about. They walk into the meeting, they're given a form, they have to sign it, put in the amount of TARP money that they're going to get, write it in themselves. The whole meeting, now think about this, the whole meeting took less than an hour. Billions of taxpayer dollars being given to banks. Some of those banks, based on the testimony we heard today, didn't even want to participate in the program, and yet they were forced to take it. That whole thing takes less than an hour with them coming in, not knowing what the meeting, they think they're coming to talk about the overall economic situation based on the testimony that Ken Lewis gave us today. This is scary. We definitely need Ben Bernanke, Hank Paulson, and frankly Tim Geithner, who was part of that October 13th meeting. We need them in front of this committee, setting the record straight or giving us, answering our questions, because it definitely looks like there were threats, both potentially at that meeting and then subsequent meeting in December when Bank of America was thinking about backing out of the Merrill Lynch deal, and Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke told Ken Lewis that he better go through with it, right, or he'd be gone and his board will be gone.
Okay, Congressman Kucinich, what is your bigger concern here? That I don't want government threatening some private enterprise and they did a deal they wouldn't have done? Or is it that I don't want Ben Bernanke or Ken Lewis lying to us in Congress when we call them for and ask them questions, they end up kind of saying something that later with emails looks like it may not be quite true?
Well, you know, all the things you've expressed are concerns of mine. Remember, I voted against the bailouts. And when I first heard the report that Bank of America was forced into its decision to acquire Merrill Lynch, it concerned me greatly. I talked to Mr. Jordan about it. We agreed we should move forward and try to get the facts. But here's what we found out. We found out that Mr. Lewis knew that Merrill Lynch was in trouble. He did not inform his stockholders of the situation of Merrill Lynch before they took the vote, and it appears that notwithstanding whatever the Fed did, it appears that Mr. Lewis was trying to blame the Fed for a decision that he made and where he didn't properly inform his shareholders on the cost of the takeover of Merrill Lynch.
Okay, and Congressman Jordan, this idea that Ben Bernanke, who did say clearly, I believe in a congressional hearing, in no way did I, press or threaten? And then these emails came out where people are talking about what Bernanke said. I mean, might Bernanke be charged with any kind of perjury? Might he have to step down?
We don't know that, but we definitely need him in front of the committee based on what we heard today answering questions. My bigger concern is this unprecedented level of government influence in the private sector. I mean, think about it. Payzar, Carzar, Auto Task Force, TARP program, and as in your first segment, coming soon to you and your family, government-run health care. This is unbelievable, and today just highlighted why we should have never started down this road. I, like Congressman Kucinich, have voted against every single bailout because this is the danger. I remember 8 months ago when we were first debating TARP, one of my colleagues said, "We don't want the government in the boardroom." We've flown right past that point, because today we have General Motors 60% equity stake or excuse me, the government with a 60% equity stake in General Motors, and a majority of the board that they've appointed. I mean, it's unprecedented where we're at. We have to move back in the right direction.
Okay, gentlemen, Congressman Jordan and Kucinich, thank you for being with us. I was supposed to wrap you like 30 seconds ago, but frankly, I'm afraid to interrupt any congressman these days, and you'll see why later in the show. Tune in if you can.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks for being here, guys.
You bet.
And next up tonight, the members of Congress who had big money in the firms getting bailout money. No wonder they were in such a punitive uproar.